welcome back to Super A to Z, the show where an out-of-touch old man talks about video games and learns about podcasting along the way. This is episode 5, and this week's episode is Real Monsters. Which, that's the last time I'll be doing that. I'll just call it Real Monsters from now on, for various reasons, sound levels and sounding like a twat. Before I do get into that though, I do have some exciting news that I just want to get into very briefly. You have heard me either here or on my Blue Sky talk about the Studio Channel 84 quite a lot. They are wonderful people with amazing content, and I talk about them a lot because I want to share their content, share their podcast, but also because I want to thank them for the support that they've given me doing this podcast. And that support carries on with me being offered an invite to join them, to join the network, Studio Channel 84. And it's just amazing to me. I really did sort of struggle to find the words when TJ messaged me about it. I started this purely for myself. It was my outlet to talk about things that I love, because I don't really have the opportunity to talk about it too much in my day-to-day life, and so this was my opportunity to just, even if no one listened, just to get my words out and get it out into the void, kind of just like say an outlet, a way of me getting that out. And the support that I started to get from everybody at Studio Channel 84 evolved into this, and I'm now going to be part of that network. And honestly, I can't thank all of them enough. TJ and Rob, the Variety Show and the Untitled Sci-Fi Show, Karen and Adam with the Lightly Used podcast, and Simon and Ross with the Who Takes the Socks Off podcast. All of them, like I say, just accepting me and this silly little podcast that I'm doing. And yeah, it's really amazing. I my show notes here, this part of it just says Studio Channel 84, don't babble, don't get emotional. So I think I've already babbled more than enough, and this is what happens when I can't really find the words for what to say. But yeah, very, very thankful, very excited, and I will go over at the end of the episode what that means for where you can find me and things like that. But ultimately, not much will change, but there'll just be a couple of more options to look at. So with all that being said, let's get to the episode. So, Real Monsters released in 95 in the US, and it was either late 95 or early 96 over here. There was no Japanese release. Release dates for SNES games seem to be quite difficult to pin down. Some places say September 95 and August 95 for the US release, and then I've had anything from November 95 to February 96 for the EU release. And I think part of that problem is European releases spread across multiple countries, and they might have had different release dates. So I think going forwards, maybe I'll stick with the year rather than a specific date as such. The game was published by Viacom New Media. That's the same mass media, Viacom, that was a huge name in the US until they were eventually taken over by Paramount in 2019. They decided to dip their toe into video game publishing and developing in the 90s. They had a hand in a lot of licensed TV and film games, Star Trek Deep Space Nine Harbinger, some more Nickelodeon games, and Are You Afraid of the Dark game that I never knew existed, a load of MTV games, with 7 of those being variations on Beavis and Butthead games. But their games arm was taken over by Virgin at the start of 97. They let them release games under the Viacom name for the rest of the year before changing the name to Virgin. It was developed by Real Time Associates Inc., and they have quite an interesting story. They've been around since the early 80s. They've worked on a few arcade games, but really started to make their name within television between 86 and 88. Then they moved into the NES and SNES with some Game Boy and Mega Drive games dotted about. And they claimed to be a learning development team. They'd hire people with no experience and teach them on the job. And one of the real interesting things about them was in 95, around the time they made this game, Sega of America got in touch with them and asked them to develop a brand new Sonic game for their brand new disc-based console, the Sega Saturn. They started making the game thinking it was a huge opportunity for them, and then Sega of Japan found out. And they weren't happy that a US-based dev team were making the new Sonic game, and they pulled the plug. The game was already started, and so they carried on and just changed the name and created the Saturn launch title, Bug. So if you've ever played that game, now you know, if you didn't already, it was originally meant to be a Sonic game. And sadly, that Sonic game never actually came to the Saturn, not even from a Japanese developer. I think they maybe only had Sonic R and Sonic Jam, which neither of those were proper Saturn games, Sonic games. They developed a load of games for the Saturn, the PS1, the N64. They moved into some PS2 releases, and then their most recent release was in 2018 and was for the SNES, which is weird. Yep, a game called Socks the Cat, Rocks the Hill, released officially for the SNES in 2018. And it's a game where you play as Bill Clinton's cat. Yeah, really. It was scheduled for release in '94, near the start of his presidency, but it was cancelled when the publisher went under. But the game was almost complete, and eventually another publisher came along and ran a Kickstarter to fund getting the game a limited run release. So that'll be an interesting one to look at when I eventually get to it, because it is an official SNES release. But that's enough about all these other games. Let's talk about this week's game, and let's start what we always do and take a look at the credits. There's not really a huge amount to go over here. There's only a couple of people worth really looking at. One of the animators was Laura Rains Smith, who worked on a few games through the mid-90s and early 2000s, a few sports titles, that sort of thing. Then in 2001, they did art for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone for Game Boy Advance and Windows, but weirdly don't seem to be credited on the PS1 version, and I assumed that was the same as the PC version, but I guess they were different with different animations. Then jumped into animation for Arkham Origins, Crackdown 3 and Borderlands 3, so some quite big games there that she moved on to. Music was by Greg Turner, who did music for Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi, and was the audio director for Gex Enter the Gecko, which is a game that I absolutely loved when I played on the PS1. They also did an awful lot of work on licensed games, more Nickelodeon games, Sesame Street, Land Before Time, that sort of thing. Jennifer Sword was the producer for Real Time Associates at the time, and while she didn't work on much after this game, she was one of the writers of the lesser known but still brilliant LucasArts adventure game Loom, and she was also credited on Secret of Monkey Island 1 and 2, although if you've seen the credits for those games, you know that I couldn't actually tell you what she did on them, but she was credited on them, so she must have been fairly important. And yeah, that's about it really for the credits. Some fairly big games for some of them moving forwards, and some big games for one of them prior to the release. And with that all said, we'll move on and talk about the game and a bit about the cartoon that it came from. Real Monsters is based on the Nickelodeon cartoon of the same name. It ran from 94 to 97 and had 52 episodes, and starred the voice talents of Charlie Adler, who was in basically my entire childhood, Transformers, DuckTales, Brave Star. He was the voice of some of the Gremlins in Gremlins 2, Rocko's Modern Life. He was both Cow and Chicken from Cow and Chicken, Aaahh Baboon in I Am Weasel, and he's been the voice of Starscream since the Michael Bay Transformers movies, although he has since voiced Starscream in more recent animated stuff as well. Christine Kavanagh, who was the voice of Babe, the pig, Dexter in Dexter's Lab, and the voice of Chucky in Rugrats. And the other person that was one of the main stars was David Eccles, who hadn't done too much acting, but weirdly was the fucking sound editor for Metal Gear Solid on the PS1, so that was pretty cool. And they had multiple episode guest stars from some big names like Tim Curry, Xander Berkeley, who, if you've watched 24, he was George Mason, Jim Belushi, Tom Wilson, he played Biff in Back to the Future, loads more. Really stacked cast, and it's exactly what you'd expect from a 90s Nickelodeon animated series. Gross out humour, some hidden adult jokes, same style of animation that the rest had, and I think it still stands up really well today. The cartoon tells the story of three monsters, Ickis, Oblina and Crumb. They're enrolled in a monster high school sort of thing. It's basically Monsters Inc. or I guess Monsters University before that was ever a thing. They go out into the world to scare people, learn best methods, and then get a diploma and graduate. I've only watched a few clips, and it's not something I remember from my childhood. I don't know if it was maybe not available over here, or if it was, it might have been on Sky, which in the 90s didn't have quite the audience it does today. We definitely didn't have Sky. But if I did watch it in 94 when I was 8 years old, I reckon I would have really loved it. And the series is basically the story of the game. The headmaster starts each level by sending you out to find some sort of object and scare as many people as possible on the way, all to graduate and get your diploma at the end of the game. They did go the best route possible for the adaptation, making it into a 2D platformer. It fits the cartoon aesthetic really well. The game's broken up into 25 levels, all very varied. There's a dump, which is where the monsters live, so it's the first level of each world. And then you've got a school, a paper factory, there's a cinema, museum, crazy inventor science lab thing. There's so much variety in what you're looking at, so the game doesn't ever really get stale in that way. The levels are quite long, but they've got well-paced checkpoints, and you usually do 2 or 3 before a boss level. One thing that did seem a bit pointless was the game makes you find a certain item in each level. For one thing, in each of the blocks of levels before the boss, you'd always have to find the same item. And then the other thing that made it all a bit pointless was that item you need was always just sat right by the exit. I do wonder if originally they maybe had the items more hidden away, but when playtesting it just became frustrating searching for them, so they changed it. But they really could have just done away with the item completely and the game would have played just as well. As you move your way through the level, your main method of attack is just throwing trash. Normally you look at 3 to 4 pieces to make an enemy run away. No killing here, just scaring. You can find fish bones that are more powerful versions that down an enemy in 2 hits usually. The levels have loads of hidden areas and they are really well designed with slides and pipes and things you can grab and hand over climb along. I'm sure there's a better way of describing that. They're usually like at the top of a level and you can grab hold of them and like shimmy, is that it? You know what I mean. The health in the levels is generous on the easiest difficulty. I did die plenty of times, but you can take a lot of hits before you do, which is quite a nice change to a lot of the platformers of the day. Sprites were all really nicely done, very detailed, really nice animations. The only downside graphically, I'd say, would be the lack of enemy variety. There's a few different kids that do things like shoot spitballs at you through a straw, which again is a really nice animation. They tend to fire 3 and then they'll pause, and while they're paused they chew up more paper. There's kids that throw frisbees and paper aeroplanes, a kid that drives remote controlled vehicles that attack you, and a few animals, birds, rats, that sort of thing. It's always the same kids across all the different levels, and I just thought it would have been nice to see a bit more variety. What there is variety for, though, is the boss fights. They all have unique mechanics. One requires you to change the direction of conveyor belts to drop boxes on their heads. One wears goggles. You have to switch the lights off and then on again to blind them. They remove the goggles and that's your opportunity to scare them. One will only get scared if you're standing in a street light so they can see you, but the lights keep getting switched off, so you have to switch them on again. It all works really well and I never felt frustrated by them. There's a button you press to scare people. There's a really nice animation where your monster changes. And it changes into a more horrible version and it roars. It's like a screen clearing attack that you have a limited number of, and each of the 3 monsters has a different animation. Speaking of 3 monsters, they are all playable simultaneously. You press the shoulder button to switch between them. They all have their scare animations, but they also all have their own triple team move, which I thought was really cool. One move stacks all 3 on top of each other, and one jumps off the top, which gives you a higher jump. One has all 3 slingshot each other, so you get a longer jump. And one just puts his eyeball on the floor, while one of the other monsters uses the third monster as a golf club and just launches it. The camera then follows the eye and it gives you a chance to scope out areas up ahead before moving on, which looked amazing. The animation was great, it was really good fun, but it wasn't really something that I actually ended up using. However, the other 2 I did use quite a lot. They really did put some effort in here, and you can tell these devs aren't new to the game. It's very well polished and very enjoyable for the most part. There were some serious frustrations though, few and far between, and mainly nearer the end. Firstly, there are these repeated mini-bosses, a cat and a dog. The cat seemed fine throughout, but the dog... that fucking dog, man. The first time you fight is easy enough. The last time had me raging. The idea essentially is you jump over it as it runs at you, and then you throw some trash at it, you repeat. If you mistime the jump, it grabs you and runs with you, shaking its jaws. It's a cool animation, reminds me a lot of Earthworm Jim. I think it did a similar thing in Earthworm Jim. But the last fight, there's this dip in the middle of the arena that the dog sometimes jumps over. There's no tell, there's no room, so to time the jump is bad enough, but then having to time it and then turn and throw trash at the dog before it bites you, it's so tough. If it does bite you, you can sometimes fall into an animation loop of it biting you, you recovering, and then it bites you again. And I died so many fucking times to this thing. There's also this fly thing that crops up a couple of times. the first time wasn't too bad. It's just annoying. It picks you up, it carries you to the other side of the screen and drops you. It doesn't cause any damage, and because it looks like a monster rather than anything else in the level, I thought maybe it was there to carry me somewhere I needed to go, like it was on my side. But then I hit it with rubbish and it flashed, so I thought, well, no, maybe I'm supposed to kill it. It just didn't seem to die, and aiming up is really awkward at the best of times, so I kept trying and it wasn't killing it, and it kept picking me up, and avoiding it was really difficult. I wasn't even sure, maybe my game was bugged, and eventually after about 20 pieces of rubbish it died, and the game just lets you move on. And it comes back later on, and this time it's so much worse because when it picks you up it drops you on spikes. So you have all the same issues the first time round, but it then causes you damage as well. And yeah, that was so stressful. And then near the end, they just throw in instant death traps, which I really hate in platformers at the best of times, but these were particularly egregious because it seemed like it was just water. There were parts before where you'd walk through bathtubs with water in, so it's not like the monsters were allergic to water or some shit. And maybe I'd understand if you fell into deep water and drowned, or it was electrified or something. But at one point on the platform you're on just dunks you into the water very briefly and you're just dead. It just seemed a bit lazy, just creating a bit of artificial difficulty near the end. Besides all that, and the few minor gripes with things like enemy variety, I had a really good time with this game. It was very well made, it looked really good, it had some really good music, sounded like it was straight out of a Nickelodeon cartoon, as it should do. Every level tells you how many people you scared, how many items you picked up, it gives you a rating. I don't think the rating actually made any difference, but it was just a nice addition to have at the end of the level. It was long enough to not get boring. The final boss having the switching the lights on and off mechanic to make them take their goggles off, it was a satisfying conclusion because you had to really sort of work at it. And you get your diploma at the end with a nice little SNES style cutscene telling you you've done well, which is always appreciated. And yeah, that's really about it for the game. I'll get into my final thoughts in a bit, but first, let's have a look at the box. The box art is exactly what you'd expect from a cartoon. The Nickelodeon logo, the three weird looking monsters chasing a rat, one has some green saliva stuff coming out of its mouth. It's gross and it's exactly what kids wanted in the 90s. The US box art has the ESRB rating, K to A, kids to adults, and on the back the reasoning for that is comic mischief. The back has 4 screenshots, descriptions, a story blurb, some bullet points of things the game offers. The story blurb is this. Ikis, Crumb and Oblina will have to prove themselves on the monster midterm exams if they want to call themselves real monsters. They must work together as a team to receive a single gruesome grade on their frightful performance. So, go out and petrify someone. And the bullet points say, explore over 25 different monster levels, including 5 bonus levels, team up the threesome to perform triple monster moves, switch the lead monster with 3-way character control, chase away enemies with unique monster scare moves. Pretty basic stuff here. It tells you exactly what the game does, no false promises, but nothing all that interesting either. I think if I looked at this when I was a kid, I'd be far more likely to buy based on the cover art and screenshots than I would be the description. Also, I did forget to mention the bonus levels. After each boss, there's a bonus level. It tells you what to collect, what not to touch. Touch the bad thing, and it's an instant end to the level. And I instantly ended every bonus level I got. It all happened so fast, and I failed every single one in probably about a second. So that's why I completely forgot they even existed. The box definitely gets a rating of accurate. No spelling mistakes this time, so bonus points for that. So I did find a bit on this one in the magazines, mostly in American magazines, but there were a couple of UK ones as well. The earliest mention was EGM's September 95 issue. It had a very small first impression style review on a single page that included 3 other reviews, so not really much to look at, but this is what they had to say. First impression. What the heck are these funny little guys? Trying to manoeuvre this band of monsters through these levels was tougher than I had anticipated. However, it has some creative ideas that help make this game work well. Best feature. The characters in the game are really goofy looking and are entertaining to watch. The option to switch between the 3 characters and the use of triple moves are also cool. What's missing? Well, for monsters, these guys aren't very scary. Maybe they could have been done in a more frightful manner. 3 characters together made it tough to control at times, but it's not too bad. Will you like it? The game has a fresh idea to it, and it was challenging to play. The monsters were pretty cool, each having a special triple move to get you through the tough spots. If you enjoy roaming adventure games, check this one out. Dave Malik. Did you play this game, Dave? Did you? Because if you did, you clearly didn't do any research prior, and you seemed like you had no clue it was based on a cartoon, with you saying monster designs could have been scarier, but also mentioning 3 characters together making it tough to control. That makes me think that he just saw a demo or something, because you control the main monster and the other 2 just follow you, a bit like Tails with Sonic, but just a bit closer behind. They're invincible. If they fall, they just port back to you soon after. There definitely isn't any problem controlling them. And also the mention of triple team moves getting you through tough spots. It just sounds like a really generic thing to say. The triple team moves actually only really get used when you can't make a jump. It's not really in tough spots. It's just, but maybe that's just me being a bit harsh. Then there was a Game Informer in October of '94. It had a similar sized review that said, based upon Nickelodeon's hit show of the same name, Aaahh! Real Monsters, said I wouldn't do that again, is a zany and crazy quest of 3 strange creatures. You must manoeuvre Ickis, Crumb and Oblina through this game's 25 levels in a quest to perfect their scaring techniques. The play is similar to that of Animaniacs, where you can switch between 3 characters, each with different skills, use the trio to locate items and scare the pants off of unsuspecting victims, and use their triple monster moves to get past obstacles or locate secrets. The quest is simple at first, but offers increasing challenge and a number of puzzles to solve. A load of non-violent fun. Overall, 7.5. So, not only did these guys know about the cartoon, but they clearly played the game and did a good job of explaining it, and 7.5 is a strong score for it. Next one is from Video Games, the Ultimate Gaming Magazine, which is one of the few magazines that rated 3 Ninjas Kick Back, which I spoke about in episode 1. They gave it a full-page review and finished by saying, Aaahh! Real Monsters is a fine game, but devoid of anything spicy. Once you cut away the interesting music and colourful graphics, you're left with nothing more than your average platform game. Kiddies might enjoy it nonetheless. Graphics 7, colourful and interesting to look at. Sound and music 7, it has Nickelodeon written all over it. Playability 6, it's still just another platform game. Overall 6. Well, I do think they've had a point. I think they may have been a tiny bit harsh as well. You could say to pretty much any game, hey, strip away all the bits that make this game different and it's just like every other game out there. That being said, this was the era of the platformer. Everyone had a platformer based on them. I reckon if I rang a random dev company and asked them to make a platformer based on me, I could have got it done. So I do kind of get the resentment on platformers in general, but I do think it's a slightly silly way of putting it. Then in December '95, there was the UK's first entry, Super Play magazine. It had a really nice 2-page spread, and I do really love how they lay the pages out in this magazine. The body of the review is well written, fairly lengthy, interspersed with loads of pictures and smaller subheading parts that talk about other aspects of the game. Their overall verdict said, it's a tad more fun than the text above makes out, but not by much. Buy Mario, Lost Vikings or Pitfall 2 instead. Graphics 82%, sound 79%, gameplay 70%, overall 65%. So another similar review. The main review is fairly downbeat on it, which is why they mention it being more fun than they maybe made out. But I do think this is due to the overabundance of platformers at the time. Next up is December '95 issue of Total magazine, and let me tell you, after reading the Superplay review, going straight into this one was something. If you listen to episode 1, I briefly went into the fact that a lot of these magazines were created by teenagers and young adults, and that really shows here. The edgy attempts at humour do nothing for me now. Maybe when I was 9 years old they would have done. But to really help you understand, I'm just going to have to read the full review. It's a full page spread, so there's a bit to it, but I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to just talk about it without you hearing it first. You know, in some magazines they have that weird fake conversation with the editor. That comes up a bit in this, so it's going to sound a bit weird. Maybe I'll give the editor an accent or something. Parentheses, 3 exclamation marks, mind. Real Monsters. As Irish comedian Jimmy Cricket would no doubt say, crazy name, crazy game, just before laughing freakishly at his own rhyming funniness. But is it a game? Does it have a name? Why, yes, of course it does. How silly we've been. It's parentheses, with 3 exclamation marks, real monsters. But of course it isn't. And they're not. Real monsters don't exist. But real monsters does, because it's like right here by my parentheses, 3 exclamations, real keyboard, looking as parentheses, 3, real as the dew dropping from the brow of a belt-tied gnome. It's a funny old melon, and all who play in her merely the excess pippage found therein.
Danny, listen. You will be fired. Now conform.
Sigh. Real Monsters is a game based on the popular Saturday morning cartoon series found bubbling away on Channel 4. It is a platform game made up of a series of levels through which your characters must traipse and tread. Icus, Oblina and Crumb, for those are the names with which they were christened, are the 3 parentheses, real monsters in question, each capable of a slightly different scare move, and each simultaneously making their way through the game with the help of your 11 talented gaming fingers and joypad technology. But where the game fails isn't in concept or cosmetics, and certainly not in attention to detail. Where things start to go horribly wrong is when you break down exactly what it is you're doing and then start to realise that, incredibly enough, it's exactly the same as what you've been doing for years. Disappearing platforms and roll-inducing ramps start to take on a sinister but comforting meaning, but too comforting, like the way your grandma's hairy lips kiss you when you're desperate to get away. Comforting, familiar, but brings you out in a rash after prolonged exposure. It would sell its puppy's soul to be Earthworm Jim, but ends up being a tired, done before, but rather stylish stab at injecting a little personality into an already overloaded market. So, nah. So yeah, nothing really of any critical merit there, just a guy trying his hardest to be funny whilst simultaneously kind of shitting on a game for not being original, despite it actually being a bit more original than a lot of the hold right until you reach the goal platformers at the time. So yeah, do better, Total, if you still exist, which I don't think you do. Another UK magazine next, back to the good old Nintendo magazine system. Another full-page review, very clearly laid out, well written, and finishes with this. Real Monsters starts out as a really fun game. It's hilarious to watch the monsters scaring the crap out of every creature that dares to go near them. But after a while that novelty wears off. You tend to forget that you have to scare the monsters and end up just jumping on their heads in instinctive platform fashion. Also working out which monster you need for each particular circumstance rapidly gets on your nerves. It's bright and colourful and the control is good, but I'd only really recommend this to dedicated fans of the cartoon. Graphics 85, bright and colourful with excellent animation. Sound 81, wacky sound effects are amusing. Playability 80, too easy to switch between monsters accidentally. Lastability 81, over 25 levels will keep you amused for ages. Overall 82. Kids that love the cartoon should enjoy this. If you know nothing about them, think twice. Again, I have some issues with this review. First of all, it seems a fairly negative wrap-up for a fairly high score. It does seem so far that graphics and sound are constantly the ones that are getting the good ratings. But the problem I had really with this review, firstly, not once did I ever instinctively jump on something's head because the game makes it very obvious that causes you damage. So I have no clue how they'd make that mistake. I guess because they're a magazine, they're playing multiple games at the same time and fall back into old habits, but yeah, definitely not an issue for the casual, regular player. Also them saying, working out which monster you need for each particular circumstances. My guy, if a platform is too high, use the ability that gives you a bit of extra height. If it's too far away, use the ability that throws you across the screen. It really isn't that complicated. And finally as well, too easy to accidentally switch between monsters. Again, never once happened to me, and I know I am using my own personal experience playing this game, but you swap the monsters with the shoulder buttons on the SNES controller. It's perfectly placed. It's exactly the right thing to use the shoulder buttons for. And even if you did do it, it literally makes no difference to the gameplay whatsoever. So yeah, weird negative to have. And finally, I'm sure you'll all be glad to hear, because this has been quite a long segment this time, we're back to the US for GamePro's February 96 issue, another one reviewed quite a few months after its release. It gets a quarter of a page and finishes up with, Beginners will appreciate the game's simplicity and the easy-to-find hidden areas, but the stiff controls may frustrate some. If you enjoy the cartoon, these monsters may pass as a rental. Graphics 2 out of 5, sound 2 out of 5, control 2 out of 5, fun factor 1.5 out of 5. They really didn't like it, and I feel like they were quite harsh with their scoring, graphics 2 out of 5, that sort of thing. I do think they were right in recommending it as a rental. I don't think it's a game you'd go back to time and time again, but rating it purely on the fun I had at the time of playing, I gave it 3.5 out of 5, which is the same score I gave 7th Saga. I had fun with it. I definitely recommend someone to take a look at it, especially if you like that era of cartoons. And now interestingly, or not interestingly, maybe boringly, I don't know, as much as I enjoyed this game, I had a lot of fun with it. It's the first one that I can think of that I had to really think about my arbitrary rating of, could this be someone's favourite game on the SNES? I think multiplayer plays a big part in whether a game could have been a favourite. Memories are often made with friends and family, and the 2 games without multiplayer that I've looked at so far had a lot more depth and replayability for someone who maybe could only afford one game for the whole year. This doesn't have multiplayer, it doesn't really have any replayability. It's a great rental game. Someone could have had a blast playing it over a weekend on a shitty cold winter. And because of that, I am going to go with yes. It is a good game. There is a lot of fun to be had. But I do think it's the closest so far not to fall into that category, despite it being tied with my highest rated game of the show so far. So I told you this was a completely ridiculous bullshit metric. So that's that. Another game down, another episode down. And there was quite a lot to talk about in this one. Next week, things could take a drastic downhill turn for me when I take on ABC, very appropriate for the show, Monday Night Football. Now, if my skill and knowledge of soccer games of the era was bad, my NFL football is a million times worse. I played a couple of Madden games on my 360, I think. I played a bit of Blood Bowl 2, and that's not even really proper NFL. But that's really it. Even if this is a good game, this might be a struggle for me. I don't know. We will see. Maybe one of the animators has a really cool backstory that I can discuss for half an hour. But anyway, that's that. I will put the box art and a few other images up on my Blue Sky if you want to follow me there at Jimbo86. That's Jimbo, the number 8, the letter E, the number 6. And now, thanks to the wonderful Studio Channel 84 people, I will also have a webpage on channel84.co.uk where I'll upload any supporting images and links and stuff. I have just got to go through a few bits. I'm not sure when things will be up there, but they are definitely coming. And there is an email address as well if you want to email me with any questions, recommendations or anything like that. superaz@channel84.co.uk is the email address, so drop me an email if you want. And yeah, thanks again to all the Studio Channel 84 people, TJ and Rob on the Variety Show podcast, Rob and TJ with the Untitled Sci-Fi Show, Karen and Adam with Lightly Used, and Simon and Ross with Who Takes the Socks Off. Please, if you don't already, do give these guys all the love in the world. Listen to their stuff, pop on the socials and comment, share. They really do deserve it. It's just such good content and such lovely people. So yeah, do check them out. And that's it for me. All that's left for me is to say, have a good week, take care, bye.
This was a Studio Channel 84 network show. To find more, head over to channel84.co.uk now.